everyone. So as Steve said, I'm Kate, and I'm in my second year of my PhD in educational studies. I came here from Brock University for my master's in social justice, which is kind of the research that I'm going to share with you today, as well as touching upon my undergrad thesis, which was still using children's literature. So I kind of bring the researcher's perspective to SOGI issues in elementary education. I started looking at children's literature, as I said, in my undergraduate thesis, starting with fairy tales, and it moved into a lot of the books that we're going to see here on the two tables, which I refer to as anti-oppressive children's literature, which I'll get into in a bit. Basically, my interest in this started when I realized that the elementary school classroom is a very gendered, very gender-binaried, heteronormative space. And so I wanted to look for what are the possible avenues that we could create more inclusive and diverse and respectful learning environments for kids. And that led me to children's books because, I mean, children's literature is oftentimes a cornerstone of elementary education. Venture to guess that most elementary school classrooms have a story corner, or most teachers use storybooks to kind of teach a lesson. But when we look at mainstream children's literature, so these are the books that I'm referring to that you just would commonly pick off of a shelf in a school library or a school classroom, they hold very strong gender scripts. So very strong ideals in terms of what it means to be a boy or a girl. They're very binary. You don't see characters going out of the gender binary very often. And as the quote I have up here says, they reproduce societal norms, teaching children and reminding adults, which I think is a very important aspect as well, of what is considered normal and acceptable. Children's texts also are very heteronormative. So within that mainstream genre that I'm talking about, you won't find a lot of LGBTQ characters. You won't find same-sex families, blended families, diverse families in that respect. And so children's texts are quite interesting, right, because they offer a window into the world around us. They oftentimes reflect society. They reflect what we consider to be valid identities that deserve representation. And so if you only have mainstream children's books in the classroom, it provides the sense that there's no room for LGBTQ identities. There's no room for gender diversity in the classroom and perhaps in society at large. So I started off by looking at how we can use the curriculum materials that are already present in the classroom. And so this began with my first study, quite a few years ago now, but my first study that looked at fairy tales in the classroom. So I joined a teacher and worked alongside her with her curriculum unit on fairy tales and took very traditional fairy tales and tried to subvert the messages a little bit, and with basic question prompts asked students to consider the gendered messages and the heteronormative messages a little bit further. So I'm not going to focus on this one today. If you want to read about it, the article that I wrote is up there, but today I'm going to focus on my favorite, which is anti-oppressive children's literature. And I chose this term to refer to any book that has positive portrayals of LGBTQ characters, gender diversity, gender nonconformity. There's a book about a transgender character. And I also like this term because I think it can encompass a broad range of marginalized identities. So also talking about ability, class, race, culture, things like that. And I didn't use all of these books in my study, but I like all of them, and I have all of them in my collection, and quite a few of them are up there as well. The problem with these books being, of course, that they're not perfect either. There are a lot of issues within the texts. Some key issues in Tango Makes Three and 10,000 Dresses that perhaps I wouldn't say that this is a perfect example of a great anti-oppressive book. However, they still offer great opportunities to discuss these issues with kids in the classroom. Other issue being is that, as I think other panelists will speak to today, that discourses of childhood innocence and especially developmental appropriateness often are used as shields against talking about these issues in the classroom, because a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, adults in general, think that it's risky to talk about these issues with young kids, that they might get the wrong idea or they're not ready developmentally for it. However, we know that children do talk about gender and sexuality on a near daily basis. They're just talking about normative gender. They're talking about heterosexuality. And so to demonize the marginalized sexualities is placing kind of a value statement on those if we're not willing to talk about them. So my whole prerogative here was how to use these books in the classroom and how to kind of show that children are definitely willing and they're able to talk about these discourses in the classroom and take them up in their own way. And so the next couple slides and the next couple minutes that I have, I'll show some of the kind of conversations that I had with the students around these texts, just to kind of get a sense of how I use them and what the kids said, because that's always the fun part. So this is a page from 10,000 Dresses, which is this orange book in the right-hand corner there. And up until this point, all the students thought that Bailey was a girl. When I first, also I had reading groups with my students. So they're, to contextualize, they're in grade 1-2 split classroom. So they're all about 6 to 7 years old, and I had 2 reading groups with 10 students each. So I would choose a book for that day, and we would just sit around and talk about the book. I'd ask questions. And this particular day, we read 10,000 Dresses, and before opening the book, I asked, like, what do we think of Bailey? Like, who is this character? And they all thought that she was a girl. She's wearing a dress. And up until this point, they all thought that she was a girl. And also, the author uses female pronouns when referring to Bailey. But on this particular page, Bailey's mother says that you're a boy. And so this kind of offered some conflict in the students' minds, and they weren't quite sure how to address it. What does it mean when the author is using a female pronoun if the mother says that she's a boy? And so the student said, what? Alexis said, well, they were tricking us, which is how I got the title of my thesis. And Alexis said they were probably trying to. And I asked, well, why would the author use she if Bailey's mother says that she's a boy? And again, they're trying to trick you. And Julia, and these are all fake names, by the way, I think it's because Bailey is really feeling like a girl, and he's acting like a girl. So the author is calling him a girl because I think it makes him feel good because he likes being a girl. So she brought to the table a very strong understanding that, well, Bailey's a girl, and even if she's not using the correct pronoun here, she's definitely grasping that the character in this book is a girl. She feels like a girl, and that's why the author is kind of affirming that identity. I particularly appreciated the role of the peer group when I did these discussions, because you can see the students before, and this is all in the same group, they're confused. They're saying, like, the author's tricking us, but then Julia offers up this opportunity, which happened quite a few times. But then the students can, of course, go back and forth based off of what Julia said. Also in the previous page, I don't know if you noticed, it said Bailey says that she doesn't feel like a boy. And so I asked the students, what does it mean to feel like a boy? Rob said, I don't know. Sarah said, only a boy would know. And Alexis said, how long? When will you know what that feeling is? What time? How old will you be? Because you're a boy and you should know. And Jesse said, I have no idea. You probably know when you're 2 or 3 years old. Another boy said 5 or 6. Sarah asked why, and Jesse said, because you're a baby, you don't even know any better. And Patrick said, well, your mom and dad pick out if you're a boy or a girl, that's the only reason, and you kind of know you're a boy or a girl by the name. So, of course, I'm doing a little happy dance in my head as I'm listening to all these responses, and I, as novice researcher at the time, didn't know how to jump off of these to talk about, yes, like, it's a social construct, but they're 6 years old, and I didn't know how to go off of that. So I kind of left it at that and said, yeah, totally cool. And then, like, just kind of moved on to the next question, and I actually have a whole presentation that I did at Congress last year about my role as a queer woman and not knowing how to input my social justice agenda while also being a researcher who is just trying to be open to these ideas without saying, yes, that is right, because I also don't want to make anyone feel badly about their response or lack of response. So this was a very interesting conversation and can be a great starting point and jumping off point for talking about gender identity with the kids. Then my last example is from And Tango Makes Three. I have the book right over there. It's a true story about two penguins, male penguins I should say, in the Central Park Zoo in New York City, who wanted to adopt a baby chick, and the zookeeper saw them with an egg, or what they thought was an egg. It was a rock. And so he replaced it with an egg so that they could adopt Tango. And so the sentence here, Tango was the very first penguin in the zoo to have 2 daddies. And I asked the kids, so are Roy and Silo a couple? And they said, because they're boys. And Sean asked, are they girls or boys? And I said, well, they're boys. And Rob said, even if you're a girl and a girl, you can still get married. And if you're a boy and a boy, you can still get married. Just offering up this information for me. And Julia said, sometimes it means you're gay if a boy wants to be with a boy or a girl wants to be with a girl. And I asked her, well, is that okay? And she's like, mm-hmm. So what I found particularly interesting is that none of this information came into the classroom. I spent about 2 months every day in the classroom observing to kind of get a sense of what was the culture of the classroom. If these kids have this information, would it come forward in the teacher's lesson about penguins, for example? And it never did. We talked about family structure, and again, this idea of gay or boys and boys marrying never came into the classroom. And so I wonder if there's just not quite space there yet for that to take place. And so what I want to kind of put out there, and I think Sarah will be talking about this quite a bit, is that these lessons can't be seen in isolation. So it's, I think, a great starting point to use a book in the classroom to talk about gender identity, to talk about sexual orientation. But if we're restricting it to one little part of the day for students, it's not changing the culture of the classroom. It's not changing the language that we use in the classroom, for example, using boys and girls, which is, as we know, very pervasive. Every time that you say boys and girls, you are putting the students back into those boxes, back into that binary. Even something as simple as in a math problem, saying Tom and his two dads went to go buy apples. I don't know, something like that, where you're just kind of shifting the language a little bit to put it out there that there are many different identities and they deserve to be represented in the classroom, to not just create this one-off lesson that oftentimes serves to other these identities even further. And if you would like lesson plans and worksheets to go with the 2 books that I talked about today, you can feel free to go to my website. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Kate. So Sarah is a teacher with Burnaby and part-time doing this role, and part-time is a grade 4-5, you
Yes, yeah, so I teach grade 4-5 a couple days a week, and I am in the district support role a couple of days a week. And so I'm going to be sort of talking about, let me just go straight to the next one, kind of about the classroom perspective and different things that you could be bringing into your classroom. So basically, I love this poster. I had this printed. I had this sent out to all of our elementary schools in multiple copies. Diversity is the one thing we all have in common. We should celebrate it every day. And when you're talking about diversity within your classroom, and you're talking about family diversity or gender diversity, when you talk about all types of diversity, nobody can really complain about that, right? So they can't pick and choose their diversities, which are acceptable to be talked about. And so I really do like that approach, the diversity of diversities within the classroom. And all school districts in our province very soon will have policies in place to support you teaching lessons about family diversity and gender diversity in your classroom. So you are supported by policy. We have provincial legislation. We have federal legislation. We had our Prime Minister in our Pride Parade here in Vancouver. So there is a lot of support for doing this, and the climate within schools, it is right. Now is the time to be doing this and finding openings to be incorporating this into what you do. Because the other thing too, not that you have to convince parents, but when we make our schools safer, more inclusive and more respectful, students achieve better results because they feel safe, they feel included, they feel represented in what is going on in their classrooms. So I think that's, all of these things are really giving us even more reason to be doing this in our classroom. Okay. So the, one of the things is building community in your classroom. And my definition that I like to use for diversity is what makes each of us unique and different and special. And at the start of the year or partway through the year, if a new student comes into the class, we can let one another know, what is it that makes you different and unique and special? Because when students can see face to face and learn about someone in their classroom, about how they also have a grandmother in the Philippines, or they also have these things in common with their classmates, it's a lot harder to make fun of and pick on those classmates. And that really helps develop a caring, supportive community in your classroom, which is about the most important thing that you can do to provide a safe learning space for your students. So with this definition of diversity, different, unique, and special, sometimes people get all bogged down in the different, and that's all that they see in someone, and that can cause conflict, right? It is normal and natural for students to notice difference in one another, right? We are all different. Nobody in this room is exactly alike, but we must look past that to how this person is also unique and special and deserves to be valued, right? So When I've done lessons to do with family diversity in classrooms, whether it's kindergarten through grade 7, there are dozens, like 20 types of families that these students know how, that exist in their communities, right? So the students are ready for these conversations. Parents, that's another story. You can talk to them, your administrator can talk to them, but the students are ready for these conversations. So we need to be having these conversations with our students. It makes a really, really big difference for the trust that we build. And just that sense of how we're each unique and different and special. I teach intermediate, but it applies to primary and intermediate. So one thing I also like to really tell my students, regardless of their age, is we must challenge the status quo. If we do not, things are going to stay as they are. So if it's in intermediate, I like to give examples of people who have stood up over time and said, no, this isn't okay. No, actually, women do deserve the right to vote. No, actually, the Chinese head tax is not okay. So there's lots of examples of people who said, this isn't okay. And letting students know that they have that voice, right? That they don't have to stay silent. And whether, I take it from a big perspective of, sort of more global issues, to the playground, right? And how they need to be thinking, what's happening on that playground? Is that okay or is that not okay, right? Because students receive messages from literature, from all different places. This is a quote. Has anyone seen that quote before from Lego? About, the urge to create is equally strong for children, boys and girls. It's imagination that counts, not skill. You build whatever comes in your head. Trucks or beds or trucks, a dollhouse or a spaceship. Lots of boys like dollhouses. They're more human than spaceships. Lots of girls prefer spaceships. They're more exciting than dollhouses. The most important thing is to put the right material in the hands and let them create whatever appeals to them. That's from 30 years ago. Man, has Lego gone off track, right? It's crazy. But our students are inundated with that. When they go into a toy store or a clothing store or a bookstore or anywhere, boys' books, girls' books, boys' stickers, it's ridiculous, right? So they have to know, like, as our job is, they have to think critically about that. They have to think, is this okay? Why do girls have separate Lego? That's dumb. Why is all the girl Lego like this? They have to be questioning this. So we can't burn all the books in the library that are reinforcing these gender stereotypes, but we can get them to think critically about them. Or, that girl who walked into the British clothing store and just reamed out the clothing that was available for boys and girls. And if you think about it, think about something they put on a newborn baby. Daddy's little princess. And on a little boy, lock up your daughters. Like on babies. These are things for babies, right? So, oh yeah, what's the big deal? You add all those things up, it's a big deal. It's a very negative message that is being sent, and we have to get our students to be critical of that. So we, as in the terms of the binary, we don't want good girls and good boys in our class. We want good human beings. We want to raise people to be their best self. And that's the kind of language that we have to start using. And in our staff rooms as well. And on PA announcements and in assemblies when I cringe when people are still saying, good morning, boys and girls. Today at, it's like, oh, really? So you can change that culture in your school, right? We would never get on the PA and say, good morning, South Asians and people from Latinos. We would never say that. We would never say that because it does not represent the diversity within our school's community, and it also reinforces stereotypes. But people don't think that with the whole girls and boys because we've said it over so long. That's how we were addressed, right? That's how a lot of people are still addressed. So we have to rethink the language that we're using. It makes a really big difference. So one of the ways I like to get conversations happening, is with things up around the building. Things that you wear, right? Clothing with a message. So celebrating gender diversity by raising awareness, International Day of Pink is a really great time to do that. Some schools celebrate Pink Shirt Day, which is coming up next week, right? Next Wednesday, the 22nd. Great. If that's time for a conversation about homophobic bullying, which is why it is Pink Shirt Day, not Green Shirt Day or Orange Shirt Day. It is Pink Shirt Day because the event originated with a homophobic incident, right? And it's been kind of watered down. Let's just talk about bullying. All types of bullying are bad. True. Can't disagree with that. But the reason it started and the history behind it is because of homophobic bullying. And that is lost because some people, some teachers aren't comfortable talking about that. And they need to become comfortable talking about that. So International Day of Pink, which is in April, a little bit more of an opportunity to have some real conversations in your classroom, K through 7, right? Kids need to know there is nothing wrong with gay. The word gay. There is nothing wrong with that word, right? Teachers don't even like to use that word. Oh, my students are saying gay. They're calling one another gay. Okay, so how can we address that? What can we do, right? These are experienced teachers that come to me and ask me to come in their class and do a quick lesson on that, which I will, because I want it to be addressed. But we have to get comfortable with these words. Because our students, if we whisper the words, then the students are like, that's a bad word. I can use that to make fun of somebody. Okay, good, got it, message received, right? If we do not address it, we are addressing it. And we are sending a very clear and damaging message when we do not address homophobia and transphobia. So these are really good opportunities. When you do it as a school, the parents can't come in and say, oh, in so-and-so's class they're doing this. Actually, this is what our school believes. And this is what we are doing as a school to promote equality of all types of families, right? So that's a great opportunity. These shirts are available. These are also great posters. Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity, lots of free resources, buttons, stickers, posters, French and English. It's just a really great way. The more stuff you have up around the hallways, you get conversations happening, right? Whether you're leading them or kids just walking by and going, oh, what's this all about, right? Their students, LGBT students, are being represented. Their families are being represented. Our staff is being represented, whereas previously they were invisible, right? So these are all good reasons to, and ways I like to bring this about. Okay. So the next way is kind of like with a theme. Different schools have different themes, and kindness is a really good theme. Nobody can really disagree with that one, right? So there's lots of opportunities when we can be connecting with kindness and defining what kindness means, right? So, you know, opening week, classroom community, that's a lot of the month of September, the month of February. Sometimes people do kindness themes because of Valentine's Day, International Day of Pink, Ally Week, International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. So from September almost till the end of the year, there are a million reasons why you can integrate a theme of kindness into your classroom. So, okay, she was unannounced helper in my presentation, so I appreciate it. So for me, what does kindness mean? Encouraging others to be their authentic self and express their identity honestly. That is kindness. When those around us, by the way we treat them, can be true to themselves and share who they are and not hide part of their identity. I think that is a really great way to think about kindness and spreading it with others. And a good question to ask kids, right? Because they're like, oh, well, that's a boy's toy. He's dressed like a girl today. What's the problem? Well, ask the kid. Was what they're doing hurting you? Was it hurting them? Is it hurting anybody? Let them do it, right? What does it matter to you how they're dressed today? What does it matter to you if they decided to paint their nails, right? Will it matter to them if you make fun of them? Yeah, that'll make a really big impact on them. But how they are dressed or what they're choosing, the activity that they're choosing, doesn't affect you at all. Just let them be, right? So I think that's a pretty simple yet really clear message that students can understand, right? Okay, next one. And the other word I really like to use, students know what bystanders are. We know what bystanders are. Most of the time, most people are bystanders. They stand by, they watch something happen. They know it isn't right. Maybe they're not sure what to say. Maybe it's a friend of theirs that's saying it. They don't say anything at all. They walk away, they let it go. That's the easy road, right? Being an upstander is someone who stands up and says something. This is what we want to encourage our students to be, right? This is how we make our world a better place. Is it easy to be an upstander? No, it is not. But when you role model with your students in the classroom scenarios, if you're on the playground and someone is making fun of someone because they don't speak any English, what could you say? If you're on the playground and someone's getting made fun of because of what they're wearing today because someone thinks it looks girly, what could you say? And give them those tools so when it happens to them or when they see it happening to someone else, they know what to say. And in our buildings as staff, we are supposed to be upstanders. So when we hear homophobic or transphobic comments, we're supposed to say something too. We can't expect our students to be upstanders if we aren't ourselves. When we see things on Facebook or Twitter or hear these comments in the staff room, if we don't say anything, how can we expect our students to say anything? And I'm not saying you have to go on a big rant and rave, but you could let the person know that you don't appreciate their comments, that they're disrespectful, that they're hurting those around them, so that they can sort of check their head. Am I going to change their mind? No, maybe not. But I'm going to let them know that in our community, those hurtful words are not acceptable. Right? And so that helps to change the climate within your school community as well as with your students. So basically, my main message here is you can make a difference. You can make a difference to your students in your classroom, to your staff, to the community, and how safe and included and respected people feel, and make it a really special, amazing learning environment just by using your words and, you know, putting in your 2 cents. So anyways, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I wonder if I can switch
Yep.
spots with you, and I'll stand over here. And we just need to pull my PowerPoint out. I'm going to talk a little bit about some tools and resources that can help you in your work as an elementary teacher in creating that inclusive environment. There we go. So the TIFA logo, SOGI 123 is a campaign and a website where you can find lots of tools and resources. You can go to the next one. So homophobia and gender-based harassment in schools. I guess we're going to have to, sorry, I thought it was,
Okay.
yeah, it's going to come bullet by bullet. This is just giving you some of the context, some of the statistics behind why this is so important. You can just go put them all up there. So I'll let you read through some of these. This one is especially important because we often think that it's LGBT students that we're really focused on and protecting here. But because of numbers, just as many heterosexual students reported harassment about SOGI as did LGBT students, which is a really good reminder if you have parents coming and saying, well, why is this important? Why? And you could say, well, it could be your kid tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. You just have to be a target. And this issue affects all students. Teen pregnancy, STDs, lost potential due to these rigid gender boxes that we put kids in because then they feel that they can't pursue things that really interest them. Teen pregnancy and STDs, this one confuses people and they often say, well, that's higher amongst LGBT students? I don't get it because they're gay or lesbian, how are they getting pregnant? But what's at play here is homophobia, which drives students to increased sexual behavior to prove themselves. And it doesn't matter whether they're LGBTQ or whether they're straight, that homophobia drives them into risky sexual behaviors in order to prove their sexuality, which is where those stats come from. Okay, next slide, please. So you as elementary educators, I'm encouraging you to not wait. Often I hear from elementary teachers, oh, well, isn't this a secondary topic? It's really not appropriate for me to address. And I say, by secondary, it's too late. These attitudes are entrenched, and they're much more difficult to deal with in secondary. You can build the understanding in elementary, just as the slide that Sarah left you with says. And by looking at these kids, you have no idea which of these kids are going to be impacted the most. So it's not oh, I'll wait till I have Johnny, who looks like he's going to grow up to be gay in my class. It has to be for everybody, okay? You may be able to tell, but you most likely won't in most cases. All right. So I want to introduce you to this website, sogieducation.org, and what you can find on it. So the idea behind this is it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Next, please. And it's divided into 3 sections. So SOGI 1 is policies and procedures, and you can look here, there are example scenarios if you're doing training with staff ever. SOGI 2 is inclusive environments. A lot of what Sarah talked about is included in SOGI 2. So posters, stickers, making your support visual, your language. Both Sarah and Kate talked about language, and using language that's inclusive and that's not demonstrating a gender binary is very important. And then SOGI 3 is curriculum and resources. So places in the BC curriculum where SOGI fits in and lessons that link to that. And I'll show you that in a moment. Keep going. So in terms of policies and procedures, in SOGI 1 you'll find the Ministry of Education's policy guide, and that gives you ministry, whether your district has, wherever you end up teaching, whether your district has a specific policy or not, you can refer to those policies as both a reactive tool. If something happens, oh, what should we do? Well, let's check what the ministry says, but also as a lens that you should be kind of doing all your planning. Okay, we're going to have a grad dance, or we're going to have Valentine's, we're going to do this in our school, we're going to have a community potluck. Let's look at these guidelines to make sure that we're using a SOGI lens and we're going to be inclusive in what we're doing. Okay, next. Those practice scenarios are very useful as well. This is the sticker that the BCTF has that I held up over there. Feel free to grab one. So try to use gender-free phrasing, language for all families, avoid groupings by gender. So the first mistake that I caution against is having boys line up over here, girls line up over here. TOCs have had real issues with this when they've had someone who is trans or gender nonconforming in their class, and I've heard of TOCs actually, sending kids to the office for going in the wrong lineup and all this stuff. You do not want to go down that road. Expand your vocabulary. There is a glossary on SOGI 2 on SOGIeducation.org. So if you're unsure of terms like heterosexism and cisgender and ones that are maybe a little bit more complex, just review that vocabulary and have a look at it. Make sure that you know all those words. And then SOGI books, examples, theme days, as Sarah mentioned. Pink Day is a great one to bring things up. International Day Against Homophobia. There's a No Name Calling Week in January with links to a book called The Misfits, which is over there. And then please always respond. Be that upstander, model that for your students, that gender-biased or homophobic language is not okay, including the phrase, "that's so gay," which the next slide kind of goes over some ways to talk about "that's so gay." So make sure you have your favorite response ready. Oh, I have some friends who are gay and they're awesome. Do you mean that's so awesome? Draw that racial religious parallel. What if we went around and said, "That's so Chinese," every time we thought something was terrible, right? What would people think of that? Do you mean it's stupid? Gay refers to a group of people, and they and their loved ones are all around you. Most of them, and many others, are offended every time they hear this. Keep going. So in terms of curriculum and resources, on SOGI 3 you'll find lesson plans, which are linked to elementary curriculum as well as secondary. There is a film and video list, a more elaborate one than is over on the table. The one on the table just has the title, so you can have a look at it, but the one online actually describes what's in the video. And then a top SOGI book list. And here you'll see some of the same books, some of the same titles that Kate mentioned, and that Sarah has also used many of these. These lessons link directly to Teach BC, which is a database of lessons for teachers in BC. All right, and if you can, just go back to the last slide, and can you click on this is a link to elementary curriculum entry points. I want to just take you there for a moment. Great. Okay, so here's the website. You see up the top the three categories: policies, environments, and curriculum. Kate, if you could click on curriculum. I just want to show you how to get into it. And then when you click on curriculum, if you go up to, these are the elementary lessons, and so there are lessons at every grade level. And if you want to, let's just pick one of them. How about
LGBT human rights?
Human rights, sure, grade 5, 6. LGBTQ human rights, and then if you click on that, It will give you the curriculum references, so big ideas, curricular competencies, content for both social 5 and 6, the rationale why the lesson's important, and then if you click on download the lesson plan, it will take you to, hopefully, TeachBC. So this is the TeachBC website, and then you can search TeachBC just for SOGI and under grade level to get the lesson that you want. And then when you, if you click on download zip, it'll click on the lesson. I've put them all in there as Word documents so that you can adjust it for however you want to change the lesson and make it your own, because I know teachers do that all the time. We don't want to restrict you from doing that. Okay, so that's how you go in to find the curriculum and the lesson plans. If you could go back to the PowerPoint. Great, and let's go to the next slide, please, Kate. Thanks. We have a district SOGI model that we're piloting this year, and it includes 9 school districts. Burnaby is one of them. And this model is one that we're trying to get out into the whole province. So if you find you're in a district next year, all of you will have fabulous teaching jobs next year. You can mention that this is a great model and that maybe your district wants to look into it. There is a district SOGI lead person, so that in Burnaby would be Sarah and her colleague Dan. And then in all of the schools, there is a SOGI school lead, and that person's meant to be the expert within the building. Not expert, but the person that, that people can ask questions to, and they will ask their questions to Dan and Sarah, and they have an idea where to get resources and that kind of thing. And just to keep the topic on maybe staff meeting agendas, so that people are thinking about it and using that SOGI lens when they're planning things. Keep going, please. And it also, the website includes a links page, which links to things like the BCTF, the Out in Schools program, Community, PFLAG, Pride Education Network, GLSEN in the United States is a wealth of resources. Welcoming Schools is another great organization, a great website. So you'll find lots of links in there. And let's keep going. And dates and theme days. I like to end on this quote from Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And as teachers, we cannot be silent. It is our professional responsibility to speak up and to include this as just another form, as Sarah mentioned, another form of diversity that you talk about in your schools and in your classrooms. Okay, how much time do we have to talk books? We have a few minutes, and perfect. It's good timing because we can take questions, and we can also show you some of the books that are around the classroom. So, does anyone have questions for Kate, Sarah, or myself? Yes?
In terms of books, do you have one you'd recommend to sort of grade 6, 7 or older elementary kids?
To talk about, okay, so that's a really good question, and one that I should probably have mentioned that I've tried to divide the books a little bit. In my books list, which is here, it's our books list because Sarah actually helped to create this list. These are just, we just wanted to give a snapshot of some really popular, really good books at each grade level. And so that's what we've done here. There are, the list, I mean, the books that are out there is much more exhaustive. A lot of the books, like 10,000 Dresses, isn't even on here because we want it to be, it's something that people can, maybe if they're doing a buy for their library, they can just buy a few. So there are different categories here. Picture books to discuss family diversity. So that's things like All Families Are Special, Todd Parr's The Family Book. This is a great book by Mary Hoffman, The Great Big Book of Families. And then specific ones like Tango Makes Three, if you're talking about, that's like a same-sex family. Donovan's Big Day, Donovan has 2 moms. So there are lots that fall into that family diversity realm. Then there's the books to discuss gender diversity and identity. And so that's more some of these kinds of books, Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress, Red, A Crayon Story. Henry Holton Takes the Ice. This is a Canadian book, fairly recent. At the intermediate level, if you're wanting like a novel, or are you thinking more nonfiction?
A novel would be fantastic.
So I like the Misfits because it approaches things from just one of the kids in this novel doesn't fit in because he thinks he might be gay and he's called sort of fairy and that sort of thing. But there are other kids who are also called names for other reasons. So it makes those connections and links with the kids and with others that this is a problem just about being different and that they band together, this group of kids who are all kind of different for whatever reason, and they run on a banner of no-name calling. This book has been recommended and used for by GLSEN, and there are lesson plans that go with it around name calling, specifically for no-name calling week, which is in January each year. So I recommend that. This is the sequel to that book, Totally Joe, and it's about the character in here who's teased for being, they think he's gay. This is the book where he kind of struggles with his identity and is he actually gay and who is he really? And it takes it from a perspective of, his identity is more than just being gay. There are a lot of different parts to his identity and that's just part of it. There are also great intermediate books nowadays which talk about gender identity. For instance, in grades 4 through 7, I've had classrooms read the book George, which is about a student who really wants to be Charlotte in Charlotte's Web and is told, no, you can't be Charlotte because you're a boy. And then The Boy in the Dress is a very funny read by David Walliams. There's another book called Gracefully Grayson, which is also an excellent intermediate level novel. One of the ones on this book is a historical fiction, which is on this list, called Riding Freedom. And my daughter just read this, she really liked it. And it's a historical fiction because it's about a stagecoach driver named Charlie Parkhurst, who actually voted in a presidential election decades before women were allowed to vote in the United States because Charlie lived his life as a man despite being born Charlotte. And so it's a great book too. Kate and Sarah, do you have other favorites that you would recommend?
I'm mostly in elementary, like
Primary?
a primary 1 to 3 storybook person, so perhaps Sarah.
I think as an intermediate teacher that any of these stories can be a great start to a conversation. Like Morris Minklewhite is an awesome book if you want to talk about people being themselves, and what I like about that story is he sticks with it. He is himself, he wants to wear that dress, he loves it for a lot of reasons, and kids realize, you know what, it's still super fun to play with you, you can wear whatever you want. So the messages are really good. I always use, primary books. I don't think they're primary books, I think they're great conversation starters with really excellent messages.
Picture books, yeah. I've used I Am Jazz. There's on the video list, there's a 4.5 minute video about Jazz Jennings in the United States, and I've used the two of them together to deconstruct and talk about gender and being transgender. And it's important to make that distinction for kids, that not everybody who, not every boy who wants to, wear a dress or play with dolls is transgender. They're just a boy who likes to do things that are, considered not a standard for boys. But it doesn't mean that it's wrong. But it doesn't mean they're transgender. This book actually talks about being transgender, and I Am Jazz talks about what that's like for her. I've used the Harvey Milk story a lot in intermediate to talk about LGBTQ rights. And on the lesson plan that we accessed up there, there's a description of how you can infuse the story of Jack and Jim Egan, who are Canadian pioneers for same-sex marriage in Canada, and so to give a historical context within Canada as well.
In terms of junior novels, like young adult fiction for middle years, what about stories that don't have the central theme necessarily about gender identity or challenges, but really as this central character where there's LGBTQ characters in an adventure, in a science fiction, so that kids who see themselves in that spectrum can connect with the principal characters if they like to read science fiction, if they want to read fantasy or what have you.
Yeah, and there are lots of those books. I don't know if you were thinking.
Yeah, I think you're thinking different. You're just thinking a book that's a science fiction book that's got a gay character or a gender nonconforming character within.
I think, in a meaningful way.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think for me, at least in Burnaby, I've worked really hard over the last 4 years to get bulk orders for our elementary schools. And in that time, there's about 65 books. There's about 10 French titles and 55 English titles. Just getting those books into those libraries, like we are just starting to do this now. And I think more things are becoming available. But in Burnaby, for instance, in most of our elementary schools now, there should be about 55 English books that are family diversity, gender diversity books. But I agree. That'll be great when there's more just books, you know what I mean? Yeah, with characters that reflect diversity.
If they're reading and they want to read, they want to see somebody that's like them in there, that they can connect with, that has a positive...
I know some librarians in elementary schools, like I've encouraged just today for them to have a diversity book club. So kids find those books where diversity is the theme, and then they get together and come up with their top 10 list for the school. So elementary could definitely do like a diversity book list or something like that. But I think I'd like to see more, but I'm working hard, but it's a challenge.
And there are a few out there. This one, Breakthrough, is a kind of autobiographical story of Jack and Draka, who is a scientist, basically a teenage scientist, and discovers basically a test for pancreatic cancer, and he just happens to be gay. And it doesn't talk a lot in this novel about his struggle with being gay, but it's more about him being a scientist and how amazing that is. Did you have a question, Lana?
Yeah. Did you have any favorite French ones off the top of your head?
They have Tango the Penguin in French.
Yeah.
They have a French version.
Okay.
And then La Fille qui aime le couleur rose or something, the boy who, in French. The boy who likes the color pink is another really good one. Yeah, they are harder to come by, the French titles, but those are a couple that I know teachers have really liked using those ones. There's another really, sorry, I just thought of another one. There's a Amnesty International book, which is in French, which talks about sort of non-stereotypical gender roles. So, who likes to dance, and it'll be a picture of a boy. Of course boys like to dance. This is all in French. And so, but that's another really good one too, just for good conversations.
Just quickly on that topic, I have a whole bunch of a list of there's a couple of specific publishers. Mostly, I can't remember actually if they're France from Quebec, but have had it's easier to find kind of anti-sexism books that are about expanding understandings of what boys and girls can do, not necessarily with the transgender piece in mind, more in terms of expanding possibilities for boys and girls. But there's still some really good stuff there while we're waiting for more French resources to be written from more of a gender identity perspective. But if you want, I can send I can't think of the exact titles off the top of my head, but I do have a list at home.
Okay.
So.
There's a book called Ulysses Alice, which is in French, and then there's a fairly new book called Zack's Safari, which is about a boy with 2 moms, and it's written in both English and French. There's Zack's Safari and there's Le Safari de Zack. And those are both just been ordered in our education library, so they should be there.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A word of caution I wanted to put out there in terms of, I think you mentioned just having a really good storybook that's not just about a trans character, but to have a good storyline, which is one of my main critiques of the books that I use. And a lot of people critiqued me for using those books, and I'm saying, well, there aren't great storybooks out there that just so happen to have, although the Christmas Truck is one that comes to mind, which I really love. It's, I think, one of the only holiday-themed books that there just so happens to be 2 dads in it. But I'm looking for more storybooks like that, and I think one of the main issues that I have as well with the trans books is that you do fall right into that binary. I read one book that when a child wanted to transition from one to the other, all of their figure skates were replaced with hockey skates. their ponytail was cut off and they got like a short crop cut. And I think, so while these books can be wonderful to open up discussions, we need to be very careful about those similar kind of tropes and the stereotypes that we get through these books. A lot of issues with the whole born in the wrong body type of thing, because not every trans person feels as though they're born in the wrong body. It's just that they've been assigned this identity that they don't fit with. And so we also need more books about gender nonconformity and gender being outside of the binary and not just flip-flopping from one to the other as if it's you are now a girl, you have figure skates. So that's just one thing that I wanted to put out there.
Definitely, and I think that there are more and more books like that out there, where they're talking about someone who's more on the spectrum somewhere, not necessarily flipping. Any other questions? Great. I want to honor people's time. I think we're getting very close to 1 o'clock, and so I want to just say a big thank you to Sarah and to Kate. I have a couple of little gifts for you. So, Sarah, this one is for you. Thank you very much for coming. And Kate, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right. And